The state of Saxony will have its election on the 1st of September. The committee preparing the election has announced already that the AfD will have its potential seats capped to at most 18 seats. This is a shrift explanation of what is going on, but I will have to go into detail to make sure that nobody will accuse me of lying. Of course, for the sake of reputation, we would not limit the number of seats directly or with a clean cut as it's just sounded, but in reality they have made a change that makes it nearly impossible to gain more than exactly 18 seats for this particular party in this particular election. And now I have to explain why that is. Well, first of all, our citizens have the same potential to vote any person in their constituency into the parliament as British people, Americans, Australians, and so on have. However, we also have a proportionate election system, and that is on the same ballot. When you go to the ballot box, you will find a sheet of paper that says first the name of the man or the woman who you want to vote directly into the parliament, and besides that you will have a collective, the party, the list of the power to be, and that is for the proportionate split of the parliament. For Germans, as crazy as it sounds, America, Great Britain, and so on are less democratic because the leaders of these collectives do not gain as much power as proportionate to the electorate's split on the ballot box. And if you send with this first vote, this direct name, some candidate into the parliament, but the head of the collective does not have enough votes for to fill up his proportion of the entirety of seats, then his MP gets being drowned by additional MPs being sent to the parliament by other parties. These are called Ausgleichsmandate. So your choice to send somebody into the parliament can result into other parties sending their people into the parliament, so that your choice ultimately does not matter, so that whatever your candidate wants to do, they can veto against it. That is the proportionate election system, and it gives all the power into the hands of the party leaders and takes it all away from your average citizen or from the electorate. And that is more democratic because reasons. The reality is that the weight of this first vote, the actual democratic vote, had been played down over the last decades ever more, and it's now more symbolic to somewhat play to the world the illusion that we were somewhat a sound democracy, where you can actually get somebody into the parliament that you really think is a competent person and not just a crony of a party leader. There are ever more changes when it comes to the finance and also to actually the way how people perceive the entire process. That makes it nearly impossible to rally up people for one candidate, for a direct candidate, because people have been used to vote for a collective rather than for an individual, and they are completely unused to raising funds for a candidate. They believe the state should give the money to the collective, and then this will somewhat be fairly distributed, and therefore the entire communication is safe in the hands of those parties that are already in power. Of course, there's not just only these Ausgleichsmandate that flush people into the parliament that were not voted directly, but also if the party leader gains more seats than his candidates for the constituency actually got, then he can drag in more people into the parliament than have won a constituency. And for this, and for the Ausgleichsmandate, they have lists. The AfD has now been limited this list to 18 candidates. And as I said, with this combination system, it becomes very difficult for anybody to get a candidate into the parliament that is not approved of by party leaders. And so there's little to no option to actually win more than these 18 potential seats, because the composition of the parliament by and large is done with these lists. And this list has now been, the list of the AfD has now been limited. And the reason given is that it was compiled in two separate events. Usually, all these parties have very obscure ways to compile these lists, but the AfD did something that the Greens have done for sure, and probably other parties as well. They have assembled twice to get the candidates for the positions on the list. So on these events, on these conventions, the candidates are allowed to apply for a position on these very lists. And on the first event, there were elections for every single person on that list up until 18, and that filled the entire evening. So they said they continue the event on a different time and location. And that was seen as undemocratic, particularly because on the second event, they decided that these lower ranks that are much less likely to make it into the parliament cannot be elected the same way. They cannot go with every single position and the candidates that are vying for it step by step. That was done for the most important high positions that are most likely to make it into the parliament. But from 18 on, they just assembled people and approved the entire packs of candidates. And for that, the committee of the preparation of the election claimed the candidates did not all have the same chances, and therefore the entirety of the candidates that come after position 18 have no right to be in the parliament whatsoever. So that improves their chances for sure. Of course, they would not have raised the issue for any other party. The Greens have done something like that before. As far as I know, there are no hard restrictions that say how you compile that list, and in the state actually should at least not have a right to look into the inner workings of a party as long as it is somewhat democratic. That is a demand that our election system has, that the internal procedures should be democratic. You could skip all of this, the different conventions of the different parties, and then you could skip all of this if you would stop making parties a legal entity in the first place and just think about the fairness between candidates. You don't need parties at all. So the result is that it is nearly impossible to send a candidate directly into the parliament, and it is now limited to 18 seats. The Conservatives are now limited to at most 18 seats in the state of Saxony, and that is important because Saxony is, of course, the home of Pegida and the most conservative state in the country. So that was it for the day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.